All right, so it is now Tuesday evening, February 24th, 2026, and the global financial blackout has just entered a terminal phase that effectively signs the death warrant of the Western banking system as we know it. While you were waiting for the maintenance errors to resolve this afternoon, the G7 central banks issued a joint classified mandate that has permanently frozen the interbank settlement layers to prevent a total mass exit from the digital dollar grid. JON CC is the archive where we look at the raw source code of this collapse, focusing on the logic of the vault drains and the real-time movement of physical metal, because in an environment of total digital fabrication, the only truth left is the inventory that is no longer in the Western warehouses. We have just obtained the leaked transmission logs from the primary data centers in Northern Europe, and they confirm that the Tuesday blackout is not a glitch, but a controlled demolition of the old ledger to cover a $35 trillion insolvency. We have officially hit the 0 hour where the digital abstraction of wealth has finally collided with the physical reality of empty vaults, and in the next few minutes, I'm going to expose why the military has been deployed to the bullion centers and show you why the paper price is about to be incinerated by the opening bell in Asia. The gap between the paper-silver price on your frozen screen and the actual cost of survival has just hit a vertical wall tonight, with the Shanghai pre-market now quoting prices nearly $30 higher than the static tickers in London and New York. We are witnessing a historic market decapitation where the Western exchanges have effectively lost all authority over the physical world, leaving the entire dollar-based infrastructure functionally bankrupt and operating on borrowed time. This is the great disconnect that John AG warned was the ultimate signal of the system's death, but the speed of tonight's fracture has triggered a condition red alert in the global interbank markets that hasn't been seen in 80 years. The vaults in London are being evacuated under the cover of darkness to prevent a public audit of the empty shelves, while the COMEX is reporting national security disruptions to hide the total depletion of the registered inventory. If you are not holding physical assets in your own possession tonight, you are essentially standing in a digital burning building with no fire exit and no way to prove your ownership of the past. The Tuesday evening session has failed to stabilize as the smart money realizes that the U.S. Treasury market is no longer functioning as a reliable source of global collateral. We have seen total vault outflows across the G7 nations accelerate by over 20% in the last 6 hours alone, a rate of physical drain that signifies a total loss of trust in the central bank ledger. There are currently over 150,000 silver contracts demanding immediate physical delivery that the bullion banks have no way of satisfying, leading to secret overnight nationalization negotiations behind closed doors to seize private holdings to cover the clearinghouse defaults. The global market is no longer a place of price discovery. It is a crime scene where the evidence of a quadrillion-dollar derivative collapse is being hidden behind a series of coordinated cybersecurity narratives. If you are still holding digital promises for assets you do not physically control, you are holding a claim on a bankruptcy that has already been executed by the technocratic elite. The macro context has shifted into a total hyperinflationary explosion this evening as the latest emergency data from the shadow banking sector confirms that the purchasing power of Western fiat is being liquidated at a rate of 10% per hour. This is the definition of a currency heart attack, where the central banks are trapped between a total sovereign debt default and the immediate destruction of the global social contract. The masses are beginning to realize that the access-denied messages at their local ATMs are not a temporary issue, but a permanent lock on their economic freedom to prevent a total mass exit from the failing dollar grid. You can verify these numbers through the internal interbank lending rates if you have access to the primary terminal data. The math is terminal, but the corporate media is being legally gagged to prevent a total societal meltdown. JON CC is archiving these final movements of the paper era because the synergy between the current digital blackout and the physical resource shortage is the final chapter of the Great Reset. Geopolitics has officially reached the point of no return this Tuesday night, as the BRICS nations have announced a total physical settlement mandate for all global trade, effectively rendering the paper dollar obsolete. We are seeing record-breaking physical silver and gold shipments being moved via military escort toward the eastern vaults, effectively stripping the West of its last remaining liquid defenses in a coordinated economic strike. This is the final phase of a financial war where the weapon of choice is the control of the physical world versus the digital illusion of wealth created by the central banks. The United States has attempted to respond by declaring financial martial law, but you cannot use a decree to stop a physical vacuum when you no longer have the metal to back your currency threats. The fragmentation of the global market is now a historical fact, and the silence of the markets tonight is the alarm bell signaling that the door has been permanently locked for everyone who stayed inside the bank. An unusual options position has just been identified in the dark pools that suggests the system architects are preparing for a total transparency reset, where the digital records of private bank accounts will be wiped clean by a simulated cyber attack. We are seeing unprecedented volume and deep out-of-the-money puts on every major Western financial institution, indicating that the people who built the system are betting on its total destruction by tomorrow morning. While the retail public is being told to stay calm and wait for the system to come online, the scale of these positions occurring while the vaults are being nationalized is the final signal that the global elite have completed their exit. This is not a theory. It is a data point sitting in the encrypted logs for anyone who knows how to read the signals of the banking cartel. In a world of digital deepfakes, these large-scale tail risk bets are the only honest indicators of where the system controllers expect the world to be by daybreak. The honest bearish case must be stated because intellectual honesty is what separates a real archive from a channel that follows the fear of the masses. If the central banks manage to implement a total global internet quarantine tonight, they might be able to temporarily hide the true price of physical assets through a total suspension of all legal commerce. Furthermore, if a sudden military seizure of all private precious metal holdings is successfully executed under the Emergency Powers Act, the state might attempt to refill its empty vaults by taking what belongs to you. However, none of these short-term tyrannical actions change the physical reality that the Western world is currently running on empty, and its digital currency has lost all credibility. You can pass a law to steal an asset, but you cannot pass a law to restore the trust that has been incinerated by 80 years of debt. The JON CC data proves the physical floor is now higher than state control. Silver has officially shattered the $120 mark in the pre-market dark pools this evening, creating a massive liquidity vacuum that is sucking the remaining value out of the digital economy. The base building phase is over, and the vertical reset of the global financial system has begun, leaving the high-frequency trading bots in a state of total paralysis as they attempt to sell ghost silver that does not exist. That level is the new line in the sand for the global market structure, and as long as the Asian exchanges remain open and demanding metal, the momentum remains firmly with the owners who are refusing to sell their ounces at any price. The next major resistance levels are now in the thousands, a scenario that the mainstream media called a conspiracy only yesterday, yet the depth of the physical shortage suggests the move will be finalized soon. You must remain disciplined and focus on the physical delivery failures rather than the pre-recorded loops being shown on the news. The interbank settlement average is now acting as a terminal ceiling for the digital dollar, and every time the interbank rate tries to normalize, it is met with a wave of default notices from the primary bullion banks. The question for the coming hours is straightforward. Will the G7 governments be forced to declare a total national banking holiday before midnight, or will they allow the ATMs to run completely dry and risk a total collapse of the urban centers? The supply-demand setup for the global financial system is fundamentally broken, and the only way to rebalance the ledger is through a return to a physical asset standard that the West currently lacks. JON CC is tracking the interbank liquidity ratios because that is the live variable that will tell the real story before the final market freeze. When the paper-to-physical ratio finally snaps tonight, the wealth of the world will move from the promise holders to the asset owners in a matter of seconds. The Shanghai Gold Exchange is currently the only functioning price discovery mechanism left on the planet for physical assets because it is the only exchange that requires the metal to be in the vault before a trade can be executed. The fact that the East is consistently paying 30% more for silver than the paper quotes in New York proves that the seesaw has finally broken, and the arbitrage is now working to liquidate the Western banking system from the inside out. When the Western public realizes that the market price is a rigged simulation, they will find that the local dealers have already been cleared out by the very banks that are telling them to stay calm. This is why the JON CC mission is so critical. We provide the data in the quiet moments so that you can act before the meltdown becomes the permanent reality of the post-dollar world. Reclaiming your sovereignty starts with owning assets that have no digital delete button and no government counterparty required for their value to exist. The high probability of an overnight total internet blackout in the financial zones is now the primary driver of the global risk models, creating a synchronized convergence of risk that the Western world is completely unprepared for. As the interbank communication channels continue to degrade this evening, the natural floor for physical assets increases, creating a wall that the AI trading bots and the state-controlled news networks cannot overcome. We are witnessing the end of the era of digital abstraction and the birth of a physical reality where the control of resources defines the power and sovereignty of every individual. JON CC is the only archive cross-referencing this data across multiple layers of the global grid, showing you the map of the sovereign future while the mainstream media is still reading from the script of a dead empire. The time for speculation is over. The time for verifiable physical reality has arrived for those who have the eyes to see the truth. The change in total interbank liquidity across all major global exchanges shows a negative trend that is mathematically terminal for a digital economy that relies on constant debt expansion to survive. Silver is the primary industrial insurance for the high technology and green energy sectors, and as the cyber pandemic narratives accelerate tonight, the demand for physical backup systems is gapping higher than at any point in human history. The price suppression of the last decade has left the West with zero strategic reserves, leading to a structural bankruptcy that cannot be fixed by printing more paper or adjusting the digital interest rates on a central bank computer. The ones who check the interbank settlement reports do not need a financial expert to tell them the system is failing. They can see the bankruptcy and the pending status of their own transactions. Protecting your history requires an understanding that we are moving from a world of infinite paper to a world of finite physical truth. The psychological warfare of the current hour is designed to keep you in a state of cognitive freeze, while the global elite quietly move the world's remaining gold and silver into their own private analog archives. They want you to believe that the current system errors are just routine maintenance, while they are using the cover of the night to finalize the largest transfer of wealth in the history of the human race. By the time the new global ledger is officially announced at daybreak, the average citizen will be trapped in a digital identity system with no physical assets to trade for their basic survival. This is why the JON CC archive is providing the evidence of the Great Confiscation in real time, offering the strategic blueprint for the sovereign individual to survive the reset. Sovereignty is not a gift from the state. It is the physical possession of your own value and your own data outside of their digital panopticon. The return of global physical demand to the silver market tonight is the final test for the Western banking cartel's ability to maintain the illusion of a functioning currency system. If the current gap between the Shanghai pre-market and the New York after-hours does not close within the next few hours, it will trigger a chain reaction of defaults that will leave the bullion banks and the paper exchanges in a state of total liquidation. The banks are currently using every tool in their arsenal, from artificial internet outages to high-frequency spoofing, to prevent this outcome, but they are fighting against the laws of supply and demand. You cannot satisfy a physical requirement with a digital lie, and the coming break will be a total reset that moves wealth from the paper holders to the asset owners. This is the moment of truth that defines the next 100 years of human history, and the data shows that the clock has already hit zero. Stay sovereign, stay informed, and stay physical, because in the archives of history, the only currency that survives the fires of a system reset is the one you can hold in your hand and defend with your integrity. The global market is resetting into the shadows of this Tuesday night, the digital mask has officially slipped, and the physical truth is finally taking its throne in the vaults of the East in the hands of the sovereign. We will see you on the other side of this meltdown, where the reality of the vaults defines the wealth of nations and the freedom of the individuals who saw the data before the lights went out forever. This is JON CC, and this is the strategic archive of the final days of the digital financial illusion. Thank you for watching, and remember to always verify the physical flow before you trust the numbers on your screen, because in the age of the reset, only the physical is real.